Coming up next on Words and Numbers, back to social media.
Robots and humans working together.
Tariffs and tweets.
And have California politicians lost their minds?
All this and more coming up next on Words and Numbers, a Civil original production. Check us out at civil.com. That's civl.com.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Ant, what's new and exciting in your world this week?
Well, we're going to have at California in a minute here, so I'll start off by saying something nice. There's a company in California, 1X, that produces or will be producing in 2026 a humanoid robot by the name of Neo. It's billed as a personal assistant that does everyday tasks, including things like loading the dishwasher, folding your laundry, this sort of thing. Price tag is estimated to be $20,000.
Hey, that means I'll be able to afford one in about 3 years.
What's got me thinking about this, we're all about, the robots, and they're going to work in our houses, which make us very happy. Then they're going to replace us in our work, which makes us very sad. And I wonder if we're looking at it the wrong way. Because this is the same kind of thing that happened in the advent of the computer. Everybody's saying, oh, well, on the one hand, the computer will be in my house, it'll do all my stuff and balance my checkbook. That's the only thing people used to say back in the day, of balance my checkbook, because it was the most complicated thing they could imagine a computer might be doing.
And young people today have no idea what it means to balance a checkbook.
Right, yes. But put that aside. On the one hand, we're happy about having the computers in our house. On the other hand, people are losing their minds saying, the computer is going to replace us in our jobs. And what happened? The computers became tools. Yeah, there were some jobs that were lost, but many more jobs were created that relied on the computer. And now the computer is it's a tool. Virtually everybody, unless you've got a very hands-on job, everybody's using a computer. Now, take how that actually played out, and apply it to products like Neo, this robot. And I'm wondering if the way this plays out is less of, here's a robot that is AI powered and will do all this stuff in your house, versus here's a robot that is AI assisted and is actually run by a human. In fact, the Neo has that feature that you can operate it remotely with the VR headset and all of that stuff. So imagine there's somebody who cleans houses. Now, instead of going out and to a house as you do now, when you clean the house for the person, you get paid whatever you get paid. Imagine instead that you've got 5 or 6 of these Neo robots that you've invested in, and they're all out there in people's houses. And you remote to one of the robots and get it started on doing whatever task it's supposed to do. The AI takes over, so you can now remote to one of the other robots, get it doing whatever it's supposed to do. In effect, you become a kind of like a hands-on manager of these 6 robots. I wonder if that's a more realistic way that this plays out. And if I'm correct, our concerns about robots replacing all of the physically oriented jobs are completely misplaced. That actually they're going to empower. Whereas before you could do one thing physically, now you can do 6 simultaneously.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a bit Pollyannish. I mean, I can see where you're going with it. And I mean, look, Uber's the thing, right? And pretty soon driverless, well, right now, actually, you can get a Waymo if you want, things like that. But I think any task that somebody could use a robot for, like cleaning a house, any service task, right? The pool guy, the yard guy, whatever. People who are wealthy enough can already afford their own $20,000 robot themselves.
Oh, I'm with you 100%. The wealthy people can afford this. What I'm seeing here is the ability for the middle class to afford it, because yes, you can't afford the robot, but you can rent it. Maybe you don't rent the robot, but you rent the service. So somebody comes, they drop the robot off, and it's remotely worked, and it cleans your house, and then later somebody comes and picks it up and takes it to the next place.
Maybe. And, working in favor of that argument, right? Most middle-class people don't have housekeepers because they're expensive. So this would have to drive the price down precipitously, right? If it gets down to $10 or $12 an hour and the robot can walk into your house at any time during the day when you happen not to be there. If you say, oh, I'm going to be out for 2 hours, let me order up a robot cleaning service to go over and it also takes away the worry of theft and things like that, right? So maybe I'm willing to take a wait and see attitude on it.
I think your criticism is interesting of, you can't afford, the middle-class person can't afford it, housekeeper as it is. But think back 20 years ago, middle-class people couldn't afford drivers. And yet with Uber, that's what we have.
And 30, 40 years before that, we couldn't afford dishwashers.
Right, yes.
And washing machines and all the rest. Now, I'm sure that a $20,000 robot, if it comes out next year in 2026, by 2030 will cost about $1,500, given how things work, and will be 85 times better than the one that comes out next year. And the thing that has me, and I can hear people moaning already, but I remember when I got my first flat screen TV.
Yes, right.
And I lived in Pennsylvania at the time. And I always said the day they get down to about $700, I'm good. And the Walmart ad came out $699.99 for a 43-inch flat screen TV, and we all gathered around it in wonder and said, "Ooh, it's gigantic." And I said at the time, I'm going to have a 100-inch TV one day. And a couple of years ago, they finally started producing them in decent number, and they were $10,000. $12,000, right? They're really expensive. And I saw an ad for one last week for $999.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, I got to have
it. I had a similar experience with laptops. I got my first laptop in 1992. It was $1,500. And I have gone through, I could have no idea, but it's probably on the order of maybe 5 to 10 laptops over the years. Every one of them was $1,500. Although at each time I bought it, $1,500 because of inflation was actually less. So it was cheaper, and the laptop did way better. My first one was black and white. They didn't, they didn't come in color.
Yeah, I remember the first one I ever got was a hand-me-down from somebody else who outgrew it. And I thought, ooh, that'd be pretty cool. I'll take it. And it did nothing. Right. I mean, it just did nothing. It did nothing. And I have also come in right about $1,400 to $1,700 on laptops every single time. And they get a world better every single time. So I don't doubt that robots are also going to get better, but I want to also refer people to something that I say all the time, and you wince and then you agree with me the minute I say it. Pornography fuels every technological event.
It does. It really does. I'm not happy about it, but it's true.
I know what robots are going to look like in about 5-6 years. Anyway. On to the next topic. I wanted to get us back to the social media age of majority. Remember, we talked about that in Australia just recently, and it has gone into effect in Australia, and the ripple effects are being seen. And I'm wondering how long it will take Australia to realize that now they have to ban VPNs, right? Because of course they will. But came across an article today, and I just want to read you the list of places that have started or are about to start banning social media for young people. And the ages vary from 14 to 18, so I'm not going to bother with that. And these are places that run the gamut between legislation is coming to strongly phrased parental warnings and everything in between. But Denmark, Norway, Ireland, Spain, France, the Netherlands, the EU broadly, the UK. Hang on, I'm not done yet. I just have to scroll more. And then in the United States, Florida, Virginia, Georgia, Tennessee, and Louisiana.
Wow. This
is catching some momentum. And I don't know how many of those places are going to follow through with it, right? You can never tell that sort of thing. But that many places are thinking about following through on it tells you something. And it turns out the Australians were just out in front of a much larger wave.
Yeah, one of the things it tells me is that the people who are behind these laws have no idea what they're talking about, because whatever law they come up with, it's going to take young people all of about 10 minutes to figure out how to get around it.
I think that's right. But they're also, I think, on the cusp of knowing that something is terribly wrong. I don't think they know how to address it, and I'm not sure I have any real idea how to address it either. But social media has become a destructive force. And it's especially destructive for young people.
Well, but is that a problem that fixes itself?
Well,
because I've noticed that young people are leaving social media, from what I can tell, in droves.
Maybe, but there are also young people who get lured into horrible situations. There are young people who end up killing themselves. And then there's whatever actual mental damage occurs before they dummy up and realize it's time to be on my way. And we don't expect children to be able to make those decisions for themselves in any other instance. So why do we expect it here? Like I said, I don't know what the right answer is. I just know there's a big problem. And I'm always on the side of freedom in these things. But children always present a very difficult situation for people who are always in favor of freedom.
Right. Yeah,
So,
and that kind of that cuts the legs out from under my next question, which was, what are the free speech implications? But that's kind of moot if you're talking about children, because it's not entirely clear what rights they do or do not have, or should or should not have.
And not only that, whatever rights they do have increase over their childhood, but not in any clear or obvious way. So, here we are. I just find it fascinating that, it's not just Australia. It's all these other places too. And when it's that many places, either you've got a satanic panic on your hands or there's a real problem. And my inclination is that we have a real problem here. I don't know how deep it runs. I don't know if this is the correct answer, but I'm interested to see how it all unfolds.
We're happy to announce that Civil members can join me and James for a new lecture series, Words and Numbers Live. Words and Numbers Live is a member-only series in which James and I talk about issues in politics, philosophy, and economics. We take a deeper dive and then invite listeners for a live Q&A session. You can also submit your questions for us at wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com. In this next session, which starts Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, we examine inequality. To participate in this exclusive series, subscribe to Civil at civil.com. That's CIVL.com. When you log in to civil.com, you'll find an archive of our past lecture series, as well as the collection of all our episodes of Words and Numbers and announcements about upcoming lectures in our new Words and Numbers Live series. Subscribe to Civil for $5 a month or $50 for an annual subscription.
Anyway, and that, of course, brings us to the foolishness of the week. And once again, the week has been so foolish that I offer a twofer to the people. One of the backstage guys, David Mahone, is talking about setting up a NCAA-style tournament of the foolishnesses of the week, so we can all vote on the foolishness of the year. And, the NCAA is 64, actually 66 teams. or 65 once you get to the play-in game, which is beyond ridiculous. So let's just say 64. And yet there are only 52 weeks in the year, but we got these twofers that throw everything. We might get to 64 before you know it. The first one, and the second one, for those of you who are waiting in suspense, is about our fearless leader and big toe Donald Trump. So, get your fingers tapping. Tell me I have Trump derangement syndrome again, because here we go. But Ant, I have a math problem for you. Our president has claimed that his beloved tariffs have brought in $18 trillion.
No, they haven't.
Yeah, no, am I allowed to swear? Can I?
No, you have to swear at the back end. We have children listening.
Swear at the back end.
Pay no attention to James.
You just set him up for him. I just wanted to say the B word, please. B word, please. $18 trillion. Come on. It's like
$18 trillion is off by like a factor of 10.
Oh,
5?
way more. No, 5. That's right. It's off by at least a factor of 5. And the interesting thing is, we're getting up to our GDP level at this point.
Yeah. Well, that's
like 2/3 our GDP.
I believe I'm correct that tariff revenue is around, I want to say 250 billion.
I believe 300 billion was the last figure I saw.
300 billion. And he's claiming,
remember, 18 trillion. But remember, Ant, the 300 billion that we collected was all from foreign governments, apparently. But now we have to give it back to our farmers, who have seen a precipitous decline in their sales.
Right. Oh, and they're not getting it all back. They're only getting 12 billion.
Right. So, well, what about the other, I don't know, let's throw 12 billion out as a rounding error. What about the other 18 trillion?
Right. Well, I don't know, but I just want to point out for our listeners that the claim of $18 trillion is 60 times what tariff revenues actually are. 60.
Wow. So we couldn't even do the math. That's how fantastic
when I said 3 to 5 times, I was thinking about total tax revenue. Like all tax revenue combined is 5-point-something trillion.
Yeah, so it's 3 times all of our taxes combined.
Yeah, 18, no.
This, when he said it, I thought, oh, that doesn't even pass the smell test. Come on. And then his legion of followers on Twitter started announcing it left and right as if it were true.
Well, if it were true, 2 years of that and he could pay off the debt.
Pay off the debt, that's right, which I fully advise him to do. If he's got a secret bank account with $18 trillion in it, please apply it to the debt. Let's see that.
This sort of thing is amusing to discuss, but seriously for a minute, do you think, because he's not a stupid man, do you think that he's deliberately lying, or alternatively, he doesn't know the number but really doesn't care?
I think all 3 of the things you just mentioned are possible. Because I do think he might be stupid. We've gotten to that point. I think he might be.
Well, to be off by that much is... Well, look, he's a business guy, right? I mean, he has plenty of experience in business. He understands numbers. He understands revenues.
Does he?
My hypothesis, for what it's worth, is he says this stuff hoping and largely being correct that his followers will pick it up and start repeating it, knowing darn well that it's not true and not really caring because it doesn't matter. True. The goal is to get his followers in a frenzy.
Right, and that it does. And yet, as the economy continues to decline, he has fewer followers with each passing month. And this is a reality for the Republican Party right now, because there are higher ups in the party who are saying things like, we have to get out of this hole before the midterms.
Yeah, they do. Now, I have to give him some credit here. I'm being too strong, saying give him some credit. The economy actually is doing surprisingly well. It's not doing great, but when I say surprisingly well, I mean surprising given all the stuff that's gone on the past 5 years, not just from the Trump administration, but from the Biden administration prior to that and from COVID prior to that. Given all of that, the economy is doing remarkably well. Unemployment has been rising since 2023 or thereabouts, but nonetheless, it's still markedly less than it was prior to COVID. Things aren't great, but they aren't horrible by any means, and they're getting better.
It's not a catastrophe, but the people who it's hurting the most right now are people who voted for him for the first time ever, right?
Yeah.
These were non-Republican voters who said, let's go with Trump. And he has already lost all of those people. And the midterms could be a disaster for the Republicans. We'll wait and see. There's a lot of political time between now and the next election. So we'll wait and see. But I did promise a twofer. And as you know, Rob Reiner and his wife were murdered by their son in their California home yesterday as we record this, 2 days ago, I suspect, as people will hear it. And Rob Reiner was a brilliant filmmaker. I mean, he gave us, if all he ever gave us was This Is Spinal Tap, it would have been a remarkable career. But he also gave us The Princess Bride, right? When Harry Met Sally. There were big things on his resume. And I want to read to you what the President of the United States had to say this morning upon hearing of the terrible thing that happened. A very sad thing happened last night in Hollywood. Rob Reiner, a tortured and struggling, but once very talented movie director and comedy star, has passed away together with his wife, Michelle, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome, sometimes referred to as TDS. He was known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession of President Donald J. Trump, with his obvious paranoia reaching new heights as the Trump administration surpassed all goals and expectations of greatness, and with the golden age of America upon us, perhaps like never before. May Rob and Michelle rest in peace.
Wow.
What in God's name is wrong with this man? And for those of you who were busy typing away your hate mail about Trump derangement syndrome, if you're going to hit send on that, I want you to explain to me in that email why what the president sent out is in any way appropriate.
Yeah, this is not a question of factual, although we could take that up as well. It's a question of appropriate.
And I'm starting to come to the very strange realization that there is somebody in this country with Trump derangement syndrome, and it's Trump. He's the one who says crazy shit about him. The rest of us just react to it over and over and over again. And I don't understand how the President of the United States could put something so terrible like that out into the public space. I really don't.
I'm going to paint a little more broadly here. I agree with what you said, but I'm astounded that there's not an uproar. And I don't mean from the left. I mean from civilized people saying this is not the way anyone should behave, let alone the person we've elected to represent us.
And look, I know it's not going to be J.D. Vance, right? I know it's not going to be Marco Rubio. It's not going to be administration types. They're all running for cover. But where are the Republican congressmen and senators right now?
Where's the media? How is it that
we'll see
we
where
as
the
a
media
people
is tonight.
Well, possibly so, yeah. But have we become, as a society, have we just become crass?
Coarse is the word I would use.
Coarse.
And look, I've said it before. We have become coarse largely because of our interactions on social media. Right? You don't have to look somebody in the eye to say these horrible things anymore. People used to know to be ashamed. And they also used to know that a slap in the mouth was incoming if you crossed the line. But now everybody knows that you don't have to worry about it. Anyway, it's a sad day. Losing Rob Reiner, he was a monumental talent. All the way back to his days as Michael Stivic on All in the Family. But as a director, he was really something.
What you're doing here, I think people should take a deep breath and reflect on. You can simultaneously, and I'm with you, say on the one hand, fabulous, talented director, artist, all of that, no question. And on the other hand, when it comes to his politics, a raving lunatic.
Look, I have not.
But that has nothing. The latter has nothing to do with the former.
Today, I have nothing to say about his politics. They're
Yes,
irrelevant.
and today one should have nothing to say about it.
In the future, maybe we'll talk about it. We have talked about it in the past. Today, a man has died, and we're all a little worse off for it. Speaking of being a little worse off, let's turn our gaze to California more broadly, shall we? Because a really interesting thing, I say all the time on this very podcast, I don't know why people even do business in California. It can't be worth it. And you've heard me say this
Turns
many
out
times.
it isn't.
And come to find out, we're going to start this by talking about the oil company or gas company, Valero, who is taking a $1.1 trillion hit to abandon its gas refining in the state of California. Now, this is not to say that Valero will not do business in California. It is to say that they will no longer be refining gasoline in California. They're out of the California gasoline refining business. And there is a California gas refining business because California has much, much higher environmental standards for gasoline than any other state in the country. And we've talked about before how California has different automobile requirements, and thus every state in the country gets California automobiles. But with the gas, it didn't work that way. Gas is specific to California, and that's kind of interesting, right? So,
Well, not entirely
share,
specific. Not entirely specific. You in Arizona maybe close enough that you feel a bit of the effects. There is a bleed over into some neighboring states.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to turn out to be the case or not. We'll all find out together. I see no good reason for that to be the case. We don't have the same standards that California does. Therefore, we get cheaper gas from everywhere. California only gets gas from California refineries, and then I'm going to get this wrong. I know it's South Korea and, maybe Singapore. It'll come back to me maybe or maybe not, but it's just a very small handful of foreign countries that have a 30 to 40 day pipeline to ship the gas here. So it takes a long time. And the added cost of shipping it from Korea to California is significant, right? And above and beyond that, we should, at least for a moment, answer the question of taxes and fees. And California pays the highest taxes and fees in the country at 90 cents per gallon. So,
oh wow,
right, and
that's
federal
more than Pennsylvania.
The federal gas tax is 18 cents. The other 72 cents is made up of state excise tax at 60 cents a gallon, state sales tax at 10 cents a gallon, and an underground storage tank fee at 2 cents a gallon.
And let me just point out here for people who are on about the evil profit-seeking oil companies, their profit last time I checked was round about 2 or 3 cents per gallon.
So you're looking at this between the state of California and the federal government. They get 90 cents,
right?
And an Exxon, to pick one out of the hat, gets 3. Who's Who's the greedy bastard here again?
Hmm.
I'll leave it to the people to decide for themselves. But the Valero issue is that they can't make enough money on the gas that they refine in California. They can't.
Because of the regulatory stuff. Yeah.
Because of not only the taxes and what have you, but the regulatory angle. And the regulatory angle here plays bigger than most people think, because in, what was it, last year, the year before, in a period stretching all the way back to, I believe, 2003, the California government found them guilty of some sort of environmental malfeasance and fined them $83 billion.
Wow.
And Valero said, it's probably best if we get away from this now.
Yeah.
And they're willing to take a $1.1 trillion hit to their balance sheet to get out of refining gas in California. That's
You're
what
mentioning,
they think it's going to cost them.
You're mentioning and from what I read, Valero is planned on closing in April of 2026.
But in December, this very month, that's right.
Phillips 66 is doing the same thing.
Same thing. And one would have to assume, unless one were a crazy person, that they're doing it for the exact same reason.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, you've got the Benicia facility, which is Valero. They were processing 145,000 barrels of crude oil into gasoline daily.
For perspective, those two facilities, Valero's and Phillips 66, that's 17% of California's petroleum,
which
almost 1/5.
Which will now have to be replaced by foreign petroleum.
Yep.
It'll have to be processed somewhere that's set up to process this. And look, as good economic thinkers, we have to tell people that will only happen if there's a sizable enough profit in the process. Nobody's going to say, oh, we'll do it. Don't worry about it.
Right.
People in other places will say, we'll do it. What will you pay?
There's been estimates. The lower end of the estimates I've seen is that this whole business is going to boost the price of gas in California by 25%.
That's
$1.40
immediately.
a gallon, roughly.
And that's immediately. But there's more than just that immediate effect, Another thing that's going to be lost is all the money that these two companies were plowing back into the local economy. And that goes well beyond just the people they hired and the contractors they paid. These were the companies that were sponsoring the Little League, right? And every little damn thing like that. And all of a sudden, all of this is gone. Just like that. Just like that. And what we've got here in California is a political class, and California is a one-party state, right? What the Democratic Party in California wants, it gets, because there's not nearly enough by way of Republican opposition to thwart it. And they kept saying, we want more, we want more, we want more. In this case, more environmentally friendly regulation, not knowing that there would be associated costs. And they said, well, if people have to pay a couple of cents more at the pump, so be it. Okay. People did that. They did it for decades, and they were angry about it. And let's actually stipulate that the air quality in California, especially Southern California, was so atrocious that they needed to do something.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't choose all that wisely, because they decided we were going to make business pay, and the people will pay a little more at the pump. Well, people now in California pay almost twice what I pay here in Arizona. It's like a 40%, it's like a 40, 50%, 60, 70%, depending on the season. And now it's going to be even more.
You're in Arizona. I'm outside of D.C., and they're paying double what I pay.
That's crazy, right? Crazy. But politicians in California have long disputed the existence of trade-offs. right? They just think you can wave a magic wand and you get what you want because a legislature declared it to be so. Well, everything you want costs somebody something.
And I think in a sense, they don't pay attention to trade-offs. In another sense, they kind of half-heartedly do, because one of the things that they will say here is, look, Valero Phillips 66 were emitting carbon as they go about refining petroleum, and now their carbon output goes to zero. And I looked up the number. Those two companies together were pumping into the air 3 million tons of CO2 every year, which sounds very scary. And you say, well, okay, so I'm going to pay $1.40 more a gallon, but that's 3 million tons of CO2 per year that's no longer being emitted. And that's as far as their trade-off thinking goes. Let's go to the next step, which is that Californians, as you point out, are still going to be buying petroleum. They're just going to be buying it from somebody else. And those people are emitting CO2. So it's not that this CO2 is somehow no longer being emitted. It's just being emitted somewhere else. And when you're done with all of that, while 3 million tons of CO2 sounds like a lot, what percentage of global CO2 output might you think that is?
Oh, I love guessing these things. I suspect my guess is going to horrify people at how small it is, and it's still going to be way too big. 0.1%.
Oh, good guess, but you're off by a factor of 10. It's
Yep,
1/100th of 1% of global. And that's the trade-off for California. Oh, and by the way, that's in a best case scenario. The best case scenario is that this regulation reduces global CO2 output by 1/100th of 1%. In exchange for Californians paying $1.40 more per gallon of gas.
To begin with.
To begin with.
I have to keep saying to begin with, because
To begin with.
there's a half. I'm not allowed to say that word. There is a detestable idea on the table, and it has been for a little bit. Is it time to get into that, or do you have more to say on the simple?
I'll just point out one other thing, that be aware as you think about this $1.40 per gallon of gas. It's not just $1.40 per gallon of gas. It's all your groceries are going to cost more, because why? They had to be transported by truck, and the trucks take fuel. Virtually everything you pay for is going to be more expensive because it requires fuel.
And I think people always underestimate that, right? Everything that you want has to be delivered to you in some way. And it's almost always, at least at the end, coming in with something that burns gas or diesel. Well, good luck.
James and I are delighted to be working with Civil. For years, we have been pushing people to think about how we can make the world a better place. Civil's mission of upgrading society fits exactly with what James and I have been talking about for years. Civil helps us by allowing us to do what we do best, which is researching topics that are important and communicating these to our listeners in ways that we hope they find enjoyable. To see Civil's extensive list of content, including our podcast, Words and Numbers, and our new lecture series, Words and Numbers Live, visit civil.com. That's CIVL.com.
But, Ant, I want to call our attention to the thing that is up on the screen right now, the Transportation Fuels Assessment by the nice people in the great state of California. This would be the California Energy Commission, most specifically. And as you will see by the thing that's now on the screen, there's an idea here in Table 19, and it begins with the title, Overview of State-Owned Refineries. And mind you, this came out in, 2024? So this was a hatchable plan before two of the biggest refiners decided they were going to up and leave. So if this was a hatchable plan then, it's going to be pursued as a necessary plan now. the state of California, you heard it here first, is going to get into the refinery business.
And
they're
this
gonna
is
cut out.
this is not James Harrigan speaking. This is the California Energy Commission.
That's right. This is not me speaking. I am a conduit through which this ridiculous information flows. The state of California, this document says, would purchase and own refineries in the state to manage the supply and price of gasoline. What could possibly go wrong? Oh, actually, we know what could go wrong. Go take one quick look at Venezuela and then come back.
Right, because that's how it all started there. I've got a great idea. Let's take control of the petroleum industry.
And it'll work out great because then we'll cut out all those evil corporations and they won't get profits anymore, which means everything will be better. Except now in Venezuela, there's not food because of that decision. That's literally the case, right?
That's worth tracing. Venezuela's government, in following the statement you made that, they point to these oil companies that are taking profit, and the state of, or the country of Venezuela says, okay, well, if we take it over, all that profit would come to us. So they nationalize all of the oil industry. It now belongs to the state. And here's something that's interesting. And as much as people might get annoyed about capitalists and the profit seekers, one of the things that profit seeking does is it gives you a hard incentive to reinvest in your capital. So if you are a private investor and you are part owner of an oil company and you make a bunch of profit, you're not going to go buy a boat. Or maybe you'd like to go buy a boat, but the first thing you're going to do is take a slice of that profit and reinvest it, because why? Your buildings, your machinery, your trains, your trucks are all deteriorating over time, as machinery and buildings do. You're going to take a chunk of your profit, invest it in maintaining that, because otherwise 10 years from now, it'll all be run down. You won't have a company anymore. Well,
which is exactly what happened
guess
in
who
Venezuela.
doesn't have that incentive?
Yeah.
The politicians.
Government. That's right.
Yeah.
Government thinks that you can wave a magic wand and then things happen just because you said so. But every single thing that gets oil from inside the ground to into your car requires maintenance. This is why, when people complain about landlords and how they're vampires and there should be no rent, who do you think repairs the electric when it goes bad in a building? Who do you think repairs the plumbing? Right? Who do you think paints the damn thing? Who makes sure that the doors all lock? Well, some landlords don't do that nearly well enough, but then people don't rent from them.
And someone might say as a counter argument, okay, but all we need here is some law in place that says that the politicians have to take a portion of the profits and reinvest it. And there are all kinds of problems that come with that. I don't know how successful such a thing will be, but I can point out that if the politicians don't do that, and as a consequence, all the infrastructure in this petroleum business that you have confiscated starts to decline and is no longer making a profit, none of that comes out of the politician's pocket. But
that's right.
If it's privately owned, it absolutely comes out of the stockholder's pocket. And that gives the stockholder an incentive that the politician will never have.
Never. Now, I suspect that given the culture of California and how things generally work there, and all kidding aside, it's a functional enough place. It's not my cup of tea, but I get it. My guess is that they actually will do the necessary maintenance, and there will be rules to follow, just like always. But my guess is also that they will be wildly inefficient, because government is always wildly inefficient, right? If you want efficiency, like you said, you've got to put a man's name on the bottom line. Then it will be efficient, because he will hire and fire.
When the inefficiency comes out of your pocket, all of a sudden you're very efficient.
Right. But, and I'll just ask this, is there anybody out there crazy enough to believe that the government of California is an efficient enterprise? Oh, please. Just please. And it will be worse when they do this, because government can't be run like a business because it's not designed to be that. But government can also not run a business because it's not incentivized to do it. And you're going to have nothing but problems at the end of this ugly day. And all of this could have been avoided had the government not in the first instance said, you must do X. Right? If it had said something more reasonable, like, look, we want fuel that's at least as good as anybody else in the world gets, this problem would never have emerged. Now, on the other side of that trade-off, they might not have cleaned up their environment as well as they did, because it's trade-off. And this is what politicians hate. They hate to think that I have to give up something valuable to get something valuable. So now you've got to decide which of these things is more valuable to you. And the right answer is almost always a compromise blend. Right? That we're going to pay a little more, but we're going to be reasonable about it. But if you can only get gasoline for California from 3 places in the entire world, one of which is already California, you should be able to see that you've already made a mistake. Then, when 2 of your biggest refiners say, we got to get out of here, no matter what it costs us, we have to get out of this situation, that's on you. That's just
Let's go back for a minute. You said a while ago that a couple decades back, Los Angeles was polluted. It was a horrible place, and they cleaned their act up. And there's something to bear in mind here, that when you have a problem that's particularly large, so picture Los Angeles with the smog and all of that. I can recall you telling a story of you didn't know there was a mountain in your backyard until the smog blew away one day.
Couldn't have been more than a mile away.
Right. And so when you've got a significant problem like that, it's less expensive to cut it in half than it is if you have a small problem. The smaller the problem gets, the more expensive it becomes to cut it further. And California may be in a situation right now where it has, and kudos to them, improved their environment so much that while before it was cost effective, they've now reached the point where it's no longer cost effective.
Yeah, perhaps you can say a word or two on Pareto optimalism.
Yeah, I mean, there's an optimum here, and think about it from your own perspective. Every decision we make is the same way. You know, you go to buy a car, and if you got a family, you want a car that's safe, that's got airbags, and it's got the proper seat belts and all of that thing. And of course, that makes it a little more expensive. Of course, I guess because of California, all that stuff's required now. But you can think about the other cars with the radar on them and the automatic braking and all this stuff. It becomes more expensive. At some point, it's not because you don't love your family, but at some point you say, okay, this car that I picked out is safe enough.
Enough
to
is
make it any safer would be so expensive that I'm now cutting into things like I can't give my kid piano lessons because of the extra safety on the car that I really don't need. I'd much rather have a piano lessons. That's the trade-off a person makes.
And if you wanted to make the car 99.99 safe, assuming that you can't get everywhere, then you probably can't afford a house. It's
Right.
not piano lessons, right? The last 10% of a problem costs way more than you've already spent solving the first 90.
Yep.
And, you know, people who have lived a little while know that to be true. And when you're pounding money into something and you look around and you realize, do I need to spend another dime on this? Because if the answer is no, I'm not going to.
See, in this kind of discussion is exactly the kind of discussion politicians should be having in the public sphere. We have it, people have it all the time when they make their own decisions. And we can't have those sorts of discussions because the minute somebody like you or me says what we just said, look, there's a trade-off here. Somebody else says, oh, you're heartless. You're just reducing lives to dollars.
Why do you hate children?
Right. Why do you, now there is no conversation possible.
That's right.
That
But
doesn't mean the trade-off has gone away. It just means you're ignoring it.
every business knows that there is this thing called the point of diminishing returns, right? Where you spend more and you make less. Every business knows this. No government knows this. And there you go, right? I mean, It's just that simple. Do you keep making things harder and more expensive in pursuit of a goal that any rational person would say you achieved years ago? Or do you say, all right, we can loosen up a little bit. Let's maybe back off, deregulate now that the problem has largely been solved. Well, they didn't do that because governments don't do that. And now they're out 2 of their biggest refineries.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, now you don't get those jobs back. Now you don't get gasoline unless you just do it by taxing everybody more, which California
and then you're not going to
have a whole lot of trouble doing. And then, you won't have taxpayers. You'll have lots of people, because California already has a lot of people who don't really participate in the tax economy. But, that's not exactly right, is it? They gobble up lots of tax dollars, but they don't pay a lot in. It's a problem we have nationwide, but it's a problem they have more in California. And look, if you knew, Ant, that you were going to be homeless, right, that you weren't going to be able to get a job and you're going to have to live on the streets, you're going to go to Wisconsin or you're going to go to California?
Right. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to California every single time because I won't freeze to death there.
Right. Right.
And that they've got some policies that make it easier on me, et cetera, et cetera. And you see how all of these things become quite interlaced when you look at them. But, everybody wants to look at things in isolation. They want to think about what they want and not what the cost will be. They don't ever want to talk about trade-offs. There's no such thing as diminishing returns because if you're in the government, returns are irrelevant. You just raise the tax rate. Well, sooner or later, that doesn't work. And we're getting to later in California. I feel bad for them, but they brought this on themselves.
I'm concerned about the rest of the country. I looked up average gas prices in the U.S., countrywide U.S., going back to the 1990s, and then looked up average gas prices in California, also going back to the 1990s. And what's remarkable, although the California prices are higher, they move in lockstep.
Yeah, but that's not surprising.
Now, there's all kinds of causality issues there, but at least it makes me stop and wonder how much of a spillover effect is there going to be. If the price of gas goes up 25% in California, how much is it going to go up in the Midwest?
I doubt it will go up anything because of the unique reasons it's going up in California.
I don't know.
The pipeline to the Midwest is going to be the same tomorrow as it was yesterday. That's not true of California.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on where's California going to be getting its oil from.
Well, it's gas, not oil, right? And there's only a couple of places in the world they can get it.
Right,
I think 2 other countries that they can buy it from, or they can refine it in California.
Of course it's gas. It's the refineries that are shutting down. Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God. It's not just a matter of importing petroleum. They're going to import the finished product.
That's right.
Good God.
Yeah, it gets worse. The more you think about it, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
It's kind of fantastic when you think about it. I mean, it's just, how on earth could you let it get that bad? How could a company take a $1.1 billion hit to leave a market?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, I think California, and this applies to governments in general, you get to this point because you keep asking the same question over and over. Here to problems that arise. Here's a problem. What can government do? Never do you ask, what can government stop doing? And so long as you ask, what can government do, you're going to end up with a sequence of, here's a problem, the government tries to fix it, and it creates some unintended consequence. You say, oh, let's go fix that unintended consequence with government. And government comes and does something, you get another unintended consequence, and before you know it, you've just got government everywhere.
Yep, and you're playing whack-a-mole, but
Yep.
it's not just one mole that comes up all the time. Now it's all the moles.
Right.
And look, this is going to end very badly. I already know that. I feel bad for my friends in California who are going to have to pay a very steep price for this decades-long foolishness.
Well, here
But
we are.
there it
This is December. In 2 more months, our podcast, I believe, will be 8 years old,
Oh, wow.
if I'm counting correctly. If
So
not
long, isn't it?
9, but we're somewhere in that range. And over those 8 years, you have repeatedly asked the question rhetorically, I don't know why anyone does business in California.
Yeah.
And here,
People are catching
finally,
up.
we're looking at 2 very large businesses that are saying, you know what, James? Good question.
You got a point. You got a point. People are catching on. And I think, with the mandated increase in fast food worker jobs, yeah, you're going to see Burger King. Look, Burger King's circling the drain already. Can they possibly be making a dime in California when they're paying their ne'er-do-well employees like kind of small town mayors?
Yeah.
Probably not. Probably not. So, things are going to start to close more and more. And you know what it looks like when businesses start to exit. There's a death spiral that comes along with that. This is how small towns die, right? One business leaves, then another. Before you know it, people can't make a living there. Before you know it, now they can't sell their homes, so they abandon them. When they abandon them, they fall to the earth and everything turns into a mess. Well, there's no force in nature that keeps that at the small town level.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That can happen statewide as well. Look, California is a beautiful place. It has every benefit of geography that you could imagine, minus the gigantic drawback of the fault lines that run through the place that lead to the earthquakes. But it really is blessed by geography. And that's not going to be enough to save them. I guess we end
nothing
by
else
saying,
to say about this.
ain't that a shame? In
Good
the
luck and
immortal
God bless
words of
California.
Robin Zander from Cheap Trick all those years ago. It is a shame. And I lived there for 4 years. I don't like to see them suffer, but they brought it on themselves, and now they'll have to live with it. And
Well, I wonder.
that happy note,
Before you go, I can't help but wonder. I gave a lecture in California to chiefs of staff of the California state legislature some years ago, and I floated the question to them: is it possible that California is just too large? And kind of quietly, because nobody was looking, a number of them said, yeah, we've discussed that.
yeah.
In
That was
fact,
in
they've
the- that
discussed
was
it
in-
down to the point of, if California broke apart, it would likely break apart in these 3 areas.
3 areas. That's right. That was in the water when I lived there. People would discuss it quite openly, and they were always trying to figure out how they could break it up in such a way that made sense geographically. And if you've been from Southern California to Northern California, those are 2 completely different places. They share almost nothing, right? Everything about them is different. It would be like going from Arizona to South Dakota and saying, see, America, right? Well, not so fast. So you want to have some sort of respect to geography, but then you also have to have a plan that doesn't aid one party over the other in the breakup, right? Because it'll never get through Congress if one side or the other is going to do better. And, you typically think about this in terms of Senate seats. All right, fair enough. If you broke it into 3, it would be Northern California, Southern California, and Orange County, right? Which would be completely different yet again. And the political forces there are very complicated. And to have it come out politically neutral rather than somehow benefiting Democrats pretty significantly, very hard to see. And as long as that's the case, the Republicans are unlikely to ever allow it to happen. And politically, you couldn't blame them. even if it were the right thing to do, you really can't blame them, right? Because they pursue their own interest such that it is. So I don't know.
So
where this all
I have
goes.
to, I can't let this go because I have to ask this question because the topic isn't going to come up again, I'm sure, for years. From what you're saying, it sounds like the Congress would have to approve the breakup. Why?
I think, look, I haven't looked into this in decades, so don't hold me to this. But I think it would have to flow from the same rules of admitting a new state. I think all the same rules would have to apply.
That's very interesting, as it raises a interesting loophole. Would it be possible then for California, under California's own law, to break apart and the pieces, the additional pieces, if you want to call them that, are no longer states because they haven't been admitted? But they aren't part of California either because under California law, they're now independent.
Yeah, I don't think you can redraw a state boundary without congressional oversight.
That's interesting. That gives a power to Congress, a supremacy to Congress over the states I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, I don't think you can do anything like this without congressional oversight. It's in the mix here in Arizona quite a bit because we're very proud of the fact here that we were the 48th state admitted, the last of the continental United States to join. So people talk about that sort of thing more here than anywhere I've ever been, because everywhere else I've ever been, there's nothing even close to living memory of when it wasn't a state. I mean, it's not really that close here either, right? It's pretty late in the day. But yeah, I as a political scientist, this is far afield from the things I actually care about. So I never really spent a lot of time digging into the niceties of how these things might occur. I'm just convinced I would be shocked if there were any way to do this without a congressional imprimatur on it. And you'll never get it as long as it's not perfectly neutral. And it will never be perfectly neutral. I just don't see any way in hell that could ever happen. And I think when things like this happen in California, Republicans sit back and giggle a little bit and say, well, you made your crazy state, now you live with it.
Right.
Right? And I'm kind of with them on this, and I know you are too, because you often talk about how great it is that different states can try different things to see if they work.
And this is a consequence of trying things that don't work.
It's unfortunate that they weren't able to read the obvious tea leaves here. Right? How do you miss this? How out of touch must you be? Did nobody at a multi-billion-dollar company ever say, you know what, guys, we're not going to stick around if you keep pulling this shit.
Right.
They fined them $80+ billion. Who's going to stick around for more of that? I couldn't wait to relocate to Texas or Louisiana, right? Somewhere around the Gulf of Mexico with access to the sea that just doesn't have these crackpot laws. Because I don't want to pay billions in fines for imagined offenses, even real offenses that go back to 2003 that nobody realized until just yesterday. Come on. And they're willing to leave over $1 trillion on the table to get out? Unbelievable. I mean, these sums.
You've said that number a couple times, $1 trillion.
Yeah, it's
that can't be right.
Apparently 1.1 trillion. Is what
of
number
what?
I keep
assets?
Seeing. Yeah. That's what it's ultimately going to cost them. No, 1.1 billion, not trillion.
Billion. Okay, billion.
So it was an $82 billion fine.
And
they just said, well, it's better to cut bait and run.
Right.
What if they get fined another $80 billion next year?
Right. Yes.
And the year after, and the year after, and the year after. Because government regulators have this habit of behaving exactly that way. This came up just recently. What the hell town was it? It was a pretty sizable town. For those of you who don't watch, you should check out this podcast, a video on YouTube, a channel called Leto's Law. Just fantastic. A lawyer by the name of Steve Lato from Michigan. He's one of us, and I keep thinking we should ask him to come on, because he's always talking about the good things that the Institute for Justice is doing and, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
There was a town that he covered recently that a cop was videoed putting a chalk mark on a car's tire the way that parking cops do, and then turning around 1 minute later, writing a ticket on the car and leaving. And the people in the car had video evidence that he had done this. And they said, "We have you on video." And he said, "Well, maybe, I don't know." And it turns out that the town is way behind in its collections. And it seems like they might be telling their parking enforcement officers to write more tickets instead of telling parking officers to enforce the parking code. These are two very different things, right? And if you need lots of money, maybe just break your own law to go get it. Well, do you trust California not to do that with refineries? I don't. They think of these things as ATMs. Just go get the money you need. And look, I'm not saying I know they did this. I don't. I have no idea whether they did or not. But I wouldn't put it past them at all. And if I were setting up a refinery, I would not put it in California.
Right.
I also, for the record, wouldn't put it in Massachusetts or New York. Right? There are regulatory regimes that are so excessive that they militate against doing business in those places. And that's where we are in California now. Even the businesses are saying, we're out of here. Well, what's next? I think maybe Burger King. We'll see. Maybe Wendy's. Anyway, I guess that's it for this week. We're coming up on Christmas. I don't want to be happy and jolly yet, though.
Well, I think you've got another couple weeks before you have to be happy and jolly, right?
10
days. You only have, we've got, maybe 3 episodes before you have to be happy and jolly.
1.5 weeks. That's it. So I better get an attitude adjustment somewhere around here. Otherwise, things are going to go poorly for the Christmas podcast. Anyway, I'll catch you next time, Matt. I hope everything goes well in your world. And I hope you're nice to everybody. And I hope everybody can be nicer to everybody else. I know it's hard, but we can do this. We're in it together. Let's do it. See you next time, Matt.
See you next time, James. At Words and Numbers, we spend a lot of time talking about what's going on in the economy and the government, but fundamentally, all of this boils down to one thing. The greatest threat facing modern society is a lack of civility. That people who disagree somehow find it difficult, if not impossible, to discuss their differences in a civil manner. We at Civil are interested in upgrading civilization by encouraging people to engage with new ideas and ultimately engage civilly with each other. If you share this idea, please join us by subscribing at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.